Welcome to Archery Talk 101 podcast, your guide to better archery skills. We'll bring you the latest tips, tricks, and expert advice, but that's not all. We'll also have interviews with top archers and industry professionals and reviews of the latest gear and equipment and much more. Hi, my name is Rory Canterbury. I'm the host today on Archery Talk 101, and we have a special guest on the show with us today, Trevor. How you doing, Trevor?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing great. Welcome to the show, and introduce yourself. Let us know something about you.
Well, I'm Trevor Fielder. Been in the traditional archery community or archery in general probably most of my life. From middle school to now, well over 20 years. I'm the owner of Triple T Strings, which is a single string bow company making bowstrings. Director of Single String Archery Club, which is a 501c3 nonprofit in the traditional archery community. And just generally, I'm just out there a lot, hunting and fishing and enjoying our sport.
But that's really good. If they wanted to get a hold of you to get a string made, how would they do that?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook. You can search for TTT space strings, Instagram, TTT_strings, I believe. Email bowhuntmaster@yahoo.com. Those are the best ways to get a hold of us. Or you can just ping me directly, Trevor Fielder on Facebook.
Okay. Let's now the audience that's listening won't be able to see this, but nice thing about recording on a Zoom is I can actually share screens, and I can I always share your screen for your TTT strings. And here's your contact information. You can see here's Facebook TTT strings, and there's your Facebook page. So anybody looking to get a new string, it looks like you've got some pretty cool ones here. And
yeah, we share a lot of stuff on there. We do polls. We share pictures of our products. That's a big hat order that we did a voting poll so people could vote on the hat they wanted. You can see here got logo on some of the hats, so we've got some of those in production. Yeah, so just everything we share. We love to share like customer either pictures or videos of harvests, informational stuff like upcoming shoots. I'll post those to the page. There's one for the TAS World's 3D tournament that's coming up at the end of the month, Memorial Day weekend. So yeah, you can just kind of go there and follow that page and get a lot of good information in the traditional archery community.
Yeah, that was pretty good there. And let's go ahead and we'll go back to us here now. And yeah, there's a lot of Facebook pages out there. I know associated with the Archery Talk 101 podcast is Archery Talk 101 Facebook group, and it's all about helping archers. Where yours is focused towards the recurve, ours is a little more focused towards compounds because a lot of us are compounds in there, but we have a lot of traditional archers, and that's a good place to go in there and ask questions. And one of the things I didn't see in here is linked to other stuff. That's one thing that I don't do in that group is you don't post any links to anything except archery events. So you might see like the TTT strings, which go ahead and post that up there in that group as well. And anything to promote archery is what we're doing. And that's just what we like to do and help archers. And that's one of the things doing this podcast is ask your questions, whether it's in a comment or you contact one of us, ask a question, be glad to help you. So
yeah, and I spend some time over on I just joined your page, and then I'm over on Archery Life as well, which is primarily compound guys. I used to shoot a compound years ago, so I'm pretty familiar with that. And yeah, anybody I can help in the archery community, whether it's just informational about shoots or events or whatever, I'm really in tune to everything going on, at least Midwest or the eastern half of the United States. So I'm a good source of information if you're looking to get out and do some shooting with others.
now, where are you located at?
I live in real near Cincinnati, Ohio, but I'm probably traveling close to twice. Like this month will be 3 times this month out of state for tournaments and shoots. So yeah, I'm pretty much all over the place this time of year.
Yes. So what made you get started in archery?
I think, I think my first introduction was around sometime middle school, maybe high school, early into high school. I got my uncle actually got me a compound bow for Christmas one year, and it was a PSE Nova. And my dad's always been big into guns, but never really into the bows. And so I got that PSE Nova and shot it a bit. And I think I had bought one other compound, and this was still kind of high school age. It was a Hoyt Magnatech recurve, and I'm in the bow shop one day, and a guy comes in with a recurve, and this would be probably the second recurve I've ever seen in my whole life. The other one was owned by the shop owner, and he shot it a couple times, and I was just really thought it was cool. I mean, this was about the time we didn't have the internet really yet. There's definitely no Facebook, none of that kind of stuff. But we didn't have smartphones, so the information you got always came from whoever was in your town or whatever, right? So I had
Right.
very small amount of knowledge, and seen that recurve, and I just had to have it. And luckily, that guy was looking to trade for a compound, so we actually just did a straight swap right there in the bow shop, and I think I bought a couple compounds after that and did some hunting. I've killed a couple deer with a compound. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty quick fade over to the traditional side. I just got hooked on it. I'm a very analytical person, and I like to get down to like the nth degree, a little bit OCD on things. And compounds have a lot of Allen wrenches and little things that you can tweak. And I found myself adjusting more than shooting. And I don't know, it just eases my mind to go to something a little more simplistic. So that's what I do now. But yeah, I've just been hooked on it since day one. I mean, just as soon as I could see that arrow leave the bow and just take off, I mean, that was it for me. I've just been hooked on it ever since.
Yeah, there's really not much you can do. You put your rest on and you draw it back. Like, where do you put your fingers on the string? It's your only option. You
Yeah.
really don't have much in there.
And when you're when you get deep into the weeds like I do, it turns out that there is a lot more that you uncover over time. Like
Right.
with these wood bows, I mean, there's the complexity that you can add to them if you want to get the level of accuracy that I seek at at a high competition level is pretty extreme. And I mean, it may be nothing near like what you have on the compound side, but we have some tricks that we do. I mean, it's pretty cool, like some stuff that we do to get things to tune and react and behave the way we want to shoot the kind of scores we do in competition.
Yeah, there's set up. I kind of made it a little oversimple, but yeah, there's a lot of things. Your arrows and how are they fletched? They fletch with veins, they with feathers. 3-inch feathers, 4-inch, 5-inch feathers. There's a lot of variables in there, and it's not as simple as just a stick with the string flinging another stick.
Right.
That's basic description archery, but from there it goes on to all kinds of different stuff. That you can do, and
Yeah.
that's really a lot of fun in figuring some of that stuff out.
Yeah. And I think the thing that has me hooked right now, and it has for the last several years, I guess you just have to kind of progress to this level, or maybe it's just something that's really come to the forefront for me recently. And this applies across all archery is, everybody reaches the same apex with archery, in that you draw the string back and you're aiming, and now it's it's between the ears. Basically, it's that mental control over that shot, whether you're pulling a hinge or whether you're squeezing the trigger or whether you're releasing with your fingers. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Your mind wants to just either, I mean, it depends on how your brain works. You either want to hold on to it and can't let go, or you can't move your hand, or that's the less common. Or the more common is your brain screaming, shoot it, and you see those guys punching the triggers, or so it's the mental control, like that challenge of having that level of mental control over your action. I don't know. They just really, it's just something that does it for me here lately. I'm not very good at it, but it's like, it's intriguing to me to try to learn how to achieve that level of mental control where I truly feel like, when you have that shot where just everything just goes perfect and you've just executed it to a T exactly how you wanted. I mean, that's just, that's kind of like something that's really doing it for me here lately that keeps me shooting.
Yeah, that's we had a whole podcast just on the mental aspects. Actually, had a couple of them on the mental aspects of archery, and it's amazing, how much mental attitude you have to have going into it, and what you're thinking about, and actually what you're not thinking about, and it's one of those, if you're focused on anything besides aiming, you quit aiming, and that's the part that a lot of people don't really understand when they're just starting out. I know I'll tell people I found out, in archery, you use the wrist strap, and it says, well, I'll give you your first lesson for free, quit pulling the trigger. Well, how
Yeah.
do you shoot it? Yeah, okay, I knew you was pulling the trigger. Because the thing is that the mental aspect is, I'm aiming, and you have to concentrate on that, but moving the finger is a fine motor skill. You have to think about it. If now, once you get it moving, you can think about other things, but you still have to think about moving the finger while I'm talking. I'm still almost distracting myself by trying to move my finger, and
Right.
uh,
Right.
uh, you know, so that's one of the things that that mental aspect. And if you're thinking about anything except where you want the arrow to go, you quit aiming. And when you quit aiming, what are you going to hit? Don't know,
Yeah.
because you're not aiming anymore.
Right. Yeah, and it's a different, like, you can explain it many different ways and it resonates with different people differently. But yeah, it's a lot. It truly is like a lifelong journey perfection will never be achieved. There's always going to be an arrow that's every once in a while outside of the 11 ring, even if you're 12 ring, if you're an ASA guy or whatever. I mean, but yeah, it's that lifelong pursuit of perfection in every shot. I mean, that kind of drives me. I don't know. I just find it so interesting. It just keeps me shooting, I think.
Yeah, and it's fun to do. And the thing I found is, if you have anything going on, any stress or anything, either don't shoot your bow, or shooting your bow is going to relieve it, because you can't think about anything else while you're shooting. And because you're just into the moment, you're just going through the process you go through, whatever the process, whether you're shooting longbow, recurve, Olympic style, you're shooting compounds, crossbows, or even shooting firearms. You go through the process step by step by step. Now with archery, you're going to have more steps than you do with firearms, but uh you go through the step by step by step. And I know I hunted for quite a while without a sling that I put the lower cam in. And once I got one of those, it's like, how did I ever shoot without one of those? Because it's just so nice to let that the lower limb sit there. And when I'm out shooting, like on a 3D tournament, I have it sitting in that before I start drawing, because that's my process when I'm hunting. It's sitting there in that loop. I get ready, and I pull out. So that's the same thing over and over and over, and that helps keep you from changing things.
Yeah, and luckily now we have so much information sharing with social media and Facebook and podcasts and all that stuff. I only listened to my first podcast maybe 5 years ago. So, that was 15 years into my journey before I got any kind of additional learning. I mean, even with Facebook, I wasn't in a lot of 5, 7 years ago. I wasn't in a lot of, archery forums. I didn't even know that was really a thing. Like it
Yeah.
was more of a way to, in the beginning, it was more a way to communicate with just local friends and family. And then all of a sudden the groups start popping up. And now we've got like information overload. So, but what's nice is that you at least get, you don't have to necessarily travel or do whatever to get exposure to things to experiment with. I like to say it that way because every day there's somebody posting something or saying something about how you should do this or that. and it's, it's something to try, right? It doesn't mean that that person said you should do it that way, so everybody has to do it that way or it's wrong. It's just,
Right.
hey, I've never tried that, so I'm going to give that a try tonight and see if that works for me, or if it has potential, and I may give it, a try for a while. But yeah, at least that information is out there, good or bad, because whereas before you're just kind of wondering what, you hit a point with your skill, and then you just sort of wonder, like, is this as good as it gets, or could it be better, or this, you get satisfied this is good enough, and then here comes a guy and he's just shooting lights out, but you don't even know half the stuff that he's got strapped to his bow, or you never seen it before, or you don't know how much work
Right.
he's put into, whatever his form or his coaching or whatever, right? But at least that information's out there now. I mean, all you got to do is go read it or find it. So that's one bonus we all have today.
Yeah, I know when I first learned back tension release back in 95, that's also when I, went to additional training, become an instructor. And, it's like I couldn't understand how you could shoot without pulling the trigger. So it's like, and I said, well, how do you know when it's gonna go off? And then once I learned, it's like, oh, I don't want to know when it goes off. All I want to do is aim.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, how much transition you go through there. And I've been in martial arts for many years when I took that, and in teaching over the years, and I've kind of merged what I learned in martial arts, with what I'm learning in archery. So I teach what I think is the best way to shoot for me.
Yep.
And when I teach that, and then if we have to modify it for the person, uh, then we modify it. And many years of teaching martial arts and teaching archery, you learn, it's like, okay, if it's not working, I can't keep telling you the same thing over and over and over, because nothing's going to change. But you have to learn it differently. And there's different things. And I like to say, okay, here's what I want you to do, and here's why. This
Yeah.
is why
Yeah.
I'm telling you to do that. So if you know why I want you to do certain things, then you can understand, the how a little better, I think, when you're teaching. And it's, yeah, nice about now is we can record them on our phones, we can look at them, we can stop and slow motion them. When I learned it, it was VCR tapes.
Yeah.
You had a VCR tape, and they're grainy. You can't stop them and look at stuff, slow motion them. Now you can play them back in slow motion, you can do frame by frame. I can bring them up in my video editor I use for my YouTube videos, and or when I'm creating, my instructional videos or anything. I can bring that up, and I can look at a frame, and I can go to the next frame and the next frame, and I can actually extract out every frame as it is an image and look at them. Uh,
Yeah.
Before, when I was teaching, most time when I was teaching, it's like I'm watching you shoot, and I got to watch you shoot again, watch you shoot again, and look at something each time. You're looking at something different. Like I said, now there's so much information, and I can do one video, and I can look at a lot of things and help people out from
Yeah.
just starting to advanced shooters.
You definitely want to leverage your technology. I mean, again, like I said, when I started, I know I didn't have a cell phone till I was in college. And even then it was like a flip phone. It was not a smartphone of any kind. Those may have been out at that time, but where I lived, we didn't. It was very backwoods. We didn't have that stuff. So, I was probably maybe at least 10 years in before the first few smartphones came out, and I actually owned one. So the ability to go out in the yard now and have the little, $30 Amazon holder, tripod, and clip my phone into it and video myself while I'm shooting. I mean, if we're not leveraging that technology to just self-improve, I don't know what we're doing, because it's available to us now, and it's really awesome coming from a place where we didn't have it before. And on the coaching side, you mentioned that. So yeah, I do a little bit of virtual coaching myself. And what's been interesting is when I first started, I mean, I'm not really any kind of a formally certified coach, but I help a lot of people on Facebook that are beginners in sport. And what I found out was that the more people you coach, the better you get at coaching as well. And so
Right.
now I've kind of hit a level where I'm starting to come up with ideas or ways. So this is what I noticed. I noticed, you know, I tell a guy at first, I'm like, so do it like this, and they improve. But then you see them 6 months later, and they're either back to their old way or they've regressed or whatever. So then I started, like you said, I started telling them, okay, do it like this, and here's why. Now that helps a little bit. And now I've sort of hit a level where I'm trying to give people tools that they can use to self-assess. So since this is, like you said, mostly compound folks on the line here, I actually got something really cool the last a couple years ago from Levi Morgan. He has a YouTube channel, and he posted something on. It was actually a target panic YouTube video, but this, for at least traditional archers, and probably also I assume for compound, this has to be more valuable than just the intrinsic value of the target panic fix. And what he has you do is I have renamed it. I changed it a little bit for the trad guys, but I call it the flamingo drill. And what I have you do is you draw back and you aim. So everything's ready to go except for that last part. Let's just, for this example, say we're using a back tension release. We don't know when it's going to go off, right? So we're aiming, we're ready to start, squeezing that back tension release. So what you do at that point is you raise one leg, and you're going to raise the string arm leg, so the back leg, right? Whether you're right-handed or left-handed, just the back leg is the one you're going to raise. So you're standing on one foot essentially at full draw. Now, there's a couple of pieces of value to that drill. If you raise the leg and start to tip over, what you're going to, and you may tip toward the target, you may tip forward. I've never seen anybody go backwards. I have actually seen a guy go away from the target once, but I've never seen anybody go backwards. So typically you're going to lean forward and fall over, or go toward the target. That's the most common. And what you're going to find is you're out of balance. Okay. So the drill first teaches you to get into a position where you're centered over your core. And when you raise that leg, there will be very little disturbance in your aim or your positioning or how strong you feel. The trick to the drill, though, I forgot to mention, you have to start with your feet pretty close together, because if you have a wide stance and you lift, you have to do a lot of shifting.
Right.
So you start with your feet together, come to full draw, aim, raise one leg. Now, if you can do that and there's little disturbance when you raise your leg, you've achieved like step one of the value from this drill. Step two, and this is where the target panic piece of it comes in, you can actually, so when you raise one leg, even if you're doing a good job, your float of your pin, or if you're aiming with the arrow or whatever, your whole system is going to start to move more. So, if this is the float of your, and I'm pointing into the camera for those who can't see this, if this is the float of your pin and then you raise one leg, it's going to start looking like this, right? It gets twice as big and it's going all over the place. But what you have to do is give away the aim and focus on what you want to hit. And even though you're doing the big figure eight or whatever, your pin is always coming back to center. And what you'll find is if you can ignore the float and squeeze through the shot and, execute the shot, the archer's job is at the bow, it's at the arrow, it's not downrange at the target. So if you can execute with this big float and truly give away the aim and not be triggered to punch the release or triggered to jerk the whatever. I mean, I've seen people that know their back tension well enough, they can punch it if they want to, right? If you can execute your shot perfectly and give away the aim in that drill, you'll find your accuracy is almost as good, which is really amazing, because that sucker's, that sight pin is going all over the place. And so it's a really powerful drill. And if you leave people with that, with drills or something that they can do to self-assess, they'll stick with it longer, because it constantly keeps them in check, and it'll keep their level of shooting very high. So that's kind of been my focus lately, is to come up with more stuff like that. So when we coach, or I mentioned the Single String Archery Club, we have a boot camp once a year. When we have people out and we coach, we had about 100 archers last month. I give things like that, because I think that's something you can take home, and it helps you keep that high level of accuracy and continued growth in your archery.
Well, that's one of the things that I learned when I was first learning it, back, oh geez, what is it? Probably almost 30 years ago now, pushing 30 anyway. But if you focus on the pin, what are you going to hit? Whatever the pin's pointing at.
Right.
But if you focus on where you want the arrow to go on the target, like you're just saying, focus on the target, let the pin do what it was, just put it over it and just concentrate on the aim. And it's amazing,
Yeah.
like you said, how well you'll end up shooting by ignoring the pin and looking at the target.
Yeah. And if you have a sight pin and you're always aiming right on what you want to hit, that's well, I don't want to say easier, but I mean that's a great advantage. So even some of the traditional archers, we do something called gap shooting. So the arrow tip is typically, unless we're shooting really far, the arrow tip is below somewhere where we want to hit. So that's something that's more front of mind to us, is that we always want to look at what we're wanting to hit, because that arrow is going to be way down there, and if we're focusing on that,
Right.
then it throws everything off. So
Yeah, and I learned, shooting recurves because I started in the 60s when that was your only option. Longbow, recurve, and either wood or fiberglass and wood arrows. And there was no plastic, it was feathers. So that was your only option, is
yeah,
feathers, wood arrows, and recurve or longbow. And I just started, I didn't use the tip of the arrow or anything. And if I'm going to look at reference off the tip of the arrow, I might as well put a sight on there. My thinking, so
yeah,
I don't reference off the bow. I look where I want the arrow to go, so I concentrate only on the destination, and then I shoot that way. And I don't shoot them enough to get really good at it. I don't shoot my recurve that much. I have it set up for bow fishing, so I use it for that mostly. And there you don't have time to reference anything. When you're
yeah,
bow fishing, you see the fish, you draw back, shoot. There is no aiming. You don't have time to aim because they're there,
yeah.
maybe a second, 2 seconds and gone. So it's quick shooting. And I don't hold my recurve a long time because, well, I don't even hold my compound long.
Well,
I
yeah, and
try to
that's the
shoot within
difference
about three
though. When
seconds.
you have the compound, the cam rolls over and you have let off. It used to be 60 to 80%. Now, you got higher let off. I don't know what you guys have now, but 80, 85% let off cams sometimes for hunting. I think the target guys, are closer to the 60, 65%. Or at least that's what was going on in the sport when I left compound. But, with a recurve, you're holding the full weight of the bow. So a guy that
Right.
owns, say, a 70-pound compound, he may struggle, especially in the beginning, to pull a 40-pound recurve back, because
Right.
it's just, the weight is in a different place. It's in the back, not the front. And that's why, like, we have guys who shoot 50 and 60-pound recurves, not very many of them anymore. Most of us are in the I'd say the mid 40s to low 50s. But we can't, we look silly trying to pull back a 60 or 70-pound compound, because we have almost no weight in the front of the pull. Our weight stacks as it goes back, right? And
Right.
so you give me a 70-pound compound, and I mean, we'd have to place bets as to whether I would even get it back, even though I shoot a ton of archery and I shoot, fairly high poundage bows. I mean, for hunting at least. But yeah, it's just a different world. One thing that when I got that first recurve, I told you I traded at the bow shop and knew nothing about it, had no information, no Facebook to go to or information or websites. I got it home and I was like you were saying, I just was kind of looking at what I wanted to hit and shooting some arrows, and just and about 15 shots in, I thought, well, and I'd shot a lot of guns in my life because my dad was a big gun shooter, and so I
Right.
shot shotguns and everything. And I thought, I bet you I could treat this arrow like a gun barrel, like a shotgun barrel, and I could just get it under my eye somehow and look down the shaft and shoot just like I was shooting a shotgun. And sure enough, that worked. And years later, I found out that's called gap shooting, which is what we all do now. It's the most popular form of aiming in traditional archery, anyways, gap shooting. And so yeah, I just kind of figured that out. Didn't know it had a name, but yeah, 15 shots in, I became an aimer, and things went uphill from there pretty rapidly. So yeah, I do aim. No, nothing against the guy who still shoots completely instinctively, but I like to aim, and that's what I do. I got a and on the aiming subject, somebody said this to me the other day, and I want to put it out there for people. If you're going and looking for a new compound, I never thought of it this way, but a guy said that he was in the bow shop and he was trying out new compounds, and instead of having them add a sight to the bow every time when he tried a new one, he was just
Right.
shooting them on the range with no sight. And he said that really, relieving the thought of aiming really allowed him to focus on the feel and the function of the bow. And he felt like he made a much better purchase decision because one of his senses had been taken away, so his focus was on the bow and how it felt. And so that was a really good tip that I kind of just filed away in the back of my head. And I thought, well, next time I get a chance to put that out there for people, I will. So when you go and try out your new bow, if it's one with sights, maybe try it without the sights, or just so you get a better feel for the bow and you make the right purchase decision.
Well, what I used to do with them, when they come in, because I worked at both Bass Pros and Cabela's and in my own store, so I worked many years in the archery field, and I would come in and, they'd come in and we'd try a bow. They couldn't figure out, that one. One time I had 6 bows out there, and he couldn't make a decision. So I says, okay, I'm going to hand you a bow. You're going to shoot with your eyes closed. And now that took away the sight, but also took away all his sight. His hand to just feel it. And I said, shoot this one. And then I give him a different one. Shoot this one. Which one you like better? And then I'd say, and why? I didn't care why. I just wanted him to express why he liked that one better. So I sat and I give him that one and a different one, and eventually narrow it down, because now he can only go by feel. How does it feel
Right.
in his hand when he shoots it? And, like you said, it makes a much better purchase, because now you're going by the feel and you're not concentrating. Because, as humans, we get a bow, we get a sight. Our whole goal is to hit the target we're aiming at. But the sights aren't set up. Sometimes the rest even set up right. So the arrow may not even be flying anywhere close to being where it should be. And, setting them up over the years, you get pretty good at, I can bestly, roughly set up the rest where it's at. I set up the knock point, where it's put the loop on there or whatever I'm going to use. Normally I have a loop on them. I can get those pretty close to eyeballing them. And then I can look at the string, line the pins up with the arrow and the string. And, so I can get you pretty close, setting up hundreds of bows. You kind of learn how to set them up, get you in the ballpark anyway.
Right.
And then now it's just all, how does it feel? And, so those that have a death grip on them, they can't feel the difference in any of them, because they got such a tight grip on them. It's like, no,
Yeah.
the sling, let go of the bow. You don't need to hang on to it. And I'll show them up until I'll let go of the bow. It just hangs off the sling.
Yeah.
And
Some of us can taste the difference between $100 bourbon and a $20 bourbon, and some of us can't.
right.
That's what I say. So, if you're just one of those guys that just, hey, I've shot the top of the line and I've shot the middle of the road, and frankly, they both hit near the center, and that's what I'm after because I'm just trying to kill deer. Well, don't waste your money. If that's
Right.
where you're at right now. I've never been that person. So I was born to like get things down. Like if I thought I could get one more point, or I guess one hair closer to the center on the deer, that's the one I'm going for, right? And I try to get them there. That's just how I was wired. So yeah, that's for me. I just get to the fine details of things, and that's why I had to go to the more simple stuff, because I still spend a lot of time with a stick and a string, getting down, to the nitty gritty of things. And it's my brain just can't handle all the complication anymore. It's just too much.
Oh yeah, because on the compounds you have, okay, is your rest, just the center shot. It is your left and right, your up, is it high enough? Is it low enough? Is your knock point right? Is your peep in the right spot? If you're
Right.
using a kisser button, is that in the right spot? And then what's the draw weight for? Is it set right? Do I need to, increase or decrease the upper or lower limb? Do I need to
Yeah.
put more twists in the strings? And
Yep.
there's an endless amount of things that you can tweak. And then you get into arrows, and it's like, okay, how long do I need my arrow? What kind of weight do I want up front? What kind of fletching do I want? And there can just be, and then you put broadheads on them, and then that opens a whole new world of stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So yeah, broadheads specifically, let me mention a little something on that. And in the traditional side, and I don't want to offend anybody, but in the traditional side, you see comments quite often from the hunters and they say, oh, I watched this, a lot of hunting videos or compounds that you see on TV or whatever.
Right.
I saw this guy with a 70-pound compound, and we all know he's going 300 feet per second at least, right? And he shoots the deer, and he only gets, half an arrow worth of penetration. And then here I am with my 40-pound compound, and I shoot through the deer. And then they debate that why. That's something that goes
Right.
on in the forums. And the thing is like, first of all, some of these shots that you see on TV with the compounds, they can be 30+ yards. We don't shoot that far with traditional equipment. I mean, some of
No.
us may try, and some of us may, find luck in that every once in a while. But as a general rule, I think we shoot our deer at like 15 to 18 yards. And if they're further than that, we just don't shoot them or we miss them. And that's kind of the facts of it. Some people are a little bit better and more successful at longer distances, but that's the average, I would say. And so you have to consider all those things. But there's also a lot of stuff that we do on the traditional side. We geek out a little bit on our arrow penetration because we don't have a lot of energy to work with in the first place. We don't use expandable broadheads as a general rule. We don't use a lot of really wide or big fixed blades. But one thing that relates to everybody is that I've recently learned this, and it's a very interesting thing. The ferrule on your broadhead. So the ferrule is the piece in the center that the blades are attached to, and it runs down the center to the tip. And typically, it has a pretty nice taper on it. It gets skinnier the closer to the tip of the broadhead you go. If your ferrule has a very smooth transition with no abrupt increases in size, that significantly reduces the amount of push force that it takes to enter an object or a medium that would be somewhat similar to a deer or something like that, or a game animal. So like if you took a piece of foam and you had a push force gauge and you pushed broadheads into it, you would find that when you hit that abrupt transition on the ferrule of some of these cheaper broadheads, the push force goes through the roof. So it's good to purchase a broadhead that has a completely smooth ferrule. And also another piece to this fact that's really interesting to me is that there are some 3-blade broadheads out there that take less push force to enter a medium, again similar to a game animal, than a 2-blade. And with the proper sharpening techniques, because you have more cutting surface per like square inch of displacement that you're trying to go into that medium. So it's kind of a geeky thing that we're talking about here, but essentially there can be a 3-blade that is easier to push through an animal than a 2-blade in some instances. And so like, and I don't get any kickbacks for this, but the broadhead that I've sort of settled on is these VPA. I shoot these 1/8" cut VPA 3-blades because the ferrule is perfectly smooth. They're not super long. So for tuning, they tune a lot like a field point. And the 3-blade just gives me the best push force, it seems like. And man, I just, even with a 40-pound stick bow, I'm just blowing through deer like I've never have in my life. I mean, it's just really amazing to see the penetration capabilities of that broadhead.
Yeah, let's see if I can see. Oh, let me just bring them up here on. When we talk about them, I like to bring them up and actually take a look at them and see. So let's
Yeah,
go ahead
maybe
and
put
share
it up
this.
on the screen.
Yeah, so for those that are watching the video, let's get. And that's the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah, so that's the traditional glue-on. So that comes in 160 grain. They make screw-ons like for the compound guys too, and so I'll use a screw-in also. And I think the one I used last season was the 1 1/8 3-blade 150 grain, I believe is what I use. But it's similar to that. Just picture it as being a screw-on. But you can see there the ferrule is very smooth. There's no abrupt transitions in the ferrule. It has a cut on contact point, and people also really geek out on the sharpening. But I'm gonna tell you, I sharpen mine in about 5 minutes with a piece of sandpaper flat on the table, and I just push it forward, an even amount on all sides. And I will go down and grit a little bit, but otherwise they get so sharp that there's just no need to do much else.
Yeah, and that's nice that those, if you can lay them flat. I know a lot of woodworkers are going to sharpen their planes and stuff. A lot of them use sandpaper and get the super, super sharp edges. And that's the nice thing about that one is you can lay it, like you
Yeah,
said, just lay it
you can lay
flat
it
on
flat,
a smooth
or
surface.
I think it's 6-inch PVC. It could be 4-inch, but 4 or 6-inch PVC. I have a buddy. What he does is he cuts it in half, and so it's like a half dome sitting on the table, and he lays
Right.
his sandpaper over that, and he pushes his 3 blades across that to put a little bit of a different angle on them. And he seems to think that the points get a little, the blades get a little sharper that way. I've never tried it, but I mean, it sounds plausible. So maybe something to try for some of you fixed 3-blade guys out there.
Yeah, and what that does, instead of being a perfectly straight side, it's curved, so they're
Yeah.
curved in, and it just changes the characteristics of it, and I think you can get a little bit sharper point, and it's once you get that curve in it, it takes less to sharpen it because you only have to sharpen just that last little bit instead of the whole flat surface.
Yeah. Yeah. The last 2 deer that I've taken with those heads, 40-pound recurve, my draw is only probably just a hair under 27 inches, which is a pretty short. I'm 5'8". I'm pretty short guy, pretty short arms.
Yeah,
So in general, I'm not even the average height of the American male, and I still get, like, I had one deer broadside at about 18. The arrow just didn't even slow down, just completely through and kept trucking. The other deer was a little more interesting. I actually had to stand up. I'm a ground hunter. Had to stand up, rotate 90 degrees, and I shot the deer. An alert deer shot went through the heart, and on the backside he was slightly quartering, so it caught that lower knuckle of the leg of the shoulder, and it actually pushed the broadhead completely through that knuckle, and the arrow was 5 or 6 inches out the other side. So I mean, just super impressive with the penetrating power of those heads.
yeah, and they're going to stand up pretty good to hitting like bones and stuff, because it is got quite a bit of mass behind it. Now the very tip of it being so fine might wreck that, but sharpen it again.
Yeah. Both, both. I think I used the same head on both both deer. They were shot about 2 weeks apart, and just sharpened it back up after the first one. And the first one, not even sure it hit any bone whatsoever. It was just perfect broadside right in the pocket, and so it was a quick sharpening job. But even after I went through the knuckle of that other, it sharpened right up, no issues, no tip curling. That's an advantage of 3 blades, is they're just harder to curl. You shoot a 2-blade and you
Yeah.
hit bone, you're probably gonna have a curled tip or something. But there's certainly maybe better broadheads out there. I don't know. I mean, that's just, I try to find, for me, I'm not going to spend hours and days on sharpening. I'm not going to spend hundreds of dollars on broadheads. I'm going to get a good broadhead. I'm not going to get the cheapest one, but I'm going to try to find that best value for the dollar. Those VPAs are semi-affordable, and they've been super high quality for me. So that's what I'm using.
Well, and it looked like that a set of 3 of them was like $70. So, that's not that bad of a price for them, considering some of your other ones, you're paying, sometimes that much just for 1 or 2 of them, and some of
Yeah.
the high end ones.
Yeah, they're 50 or 60 on the VPA website for a 3-pack, something like that. Definitely worth it in my opinion.
Yeah.
Especially
Now
since they can be reused most of the time.
yeah, unless you hit like something really hard, like a concrete block or something.
Yeah. Or if you're one of the
Yeah.
compound guys who blows through and 40 yards later your arrow was still trucking and you never find it. I mean, I guess in that case you
Yeah.
I know some of the guys, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Well, and then that's where the lighted knocks come in. You can put them in there, and now you can see them a little bit better. And I use a wrap on mine. It's a reflective wrap below my fletching, and then you can catch them with a flashlight and catch them. But if it's buried in the grass, it's buried in the grass. The only option you might have is lighted knock. And I've even went out with a metal detector trying to find arrows. Once you hit that tip, because it's metal. Everything else is not metal, but you find that tip and you find your arrow. And I found a couple that way, but
Yeah. I laughed pretty hard one day. We were out on the 3D course, and this was a couple of years ago, but it'd been so long since I shot a compound, I forgot. And we got in behind some compound guys, and we shot with them for a couple of targets. And the guy shot, and he skipped off the back of the 3D animal, and his arrow just kind of took that perfect flight out into the woods. And you know, trad guys, when we do that, we go back there and look for the arrow because it's probably not more than 20, 30 yards behind the target. I mean,
Right.
our bows start out, uh, my speed setup right now is about 160 feet per second. So I'm in the 150s. You know, some of my like Howard Hill style ASL type longbows will get down in the 140s. So we're pretty slow when we get there, right? And you guys are just double triple speed, and we got down to the target and we pulled everybody's arrows and scored. And I said, hey, I'll go back here and help you look for that arrow. He said, oh no, he said, we're not going to go look for that. Because he knew it was 10 miles down the road, and you know there was no sense in going and looking for it. And that didn't even register with me right off the bat. I was like, I forgot that with that much speed, you know, you guys, you miss one, just forget it, it's gone, it's in the
Yeah,
woods.
at least it's not a broadhead on there, so that saves you a
Right,
little
yeah,
bit of money. But you know, like me, I shoot the Comp Pros, so I'm shooting 1,000 straightness carbon arrows, and you know, those aren't cheap to replace those.
no,
Yeah,
don't
they're
want to
because
miss.
I don't, I don't shoot anything less than that, just because I want the tightest groups I can, and you know that tolerance difference can make a difference. You know, you go with like a 6 or 7,000 straightness, you know, you might be able to keep them in the 5 ring on a 5 spot in the white, but the 1,000s you can keep them in the X ring. You know,
Yeah,
if you want to shoot X's, you're going to get the straightest shaft you can. And I know when I had aluminums, I'd buy a new dozen every hunting season, and I'd have brand new arrows that I hunted with.
yeah. Something that, you know, I do, our bows are not center cut in the traditional community a lot of times, or at least if they are, so, you know, compound, you're kind of setting up on the center shot right down the string
Right.
line. A lot of times with traditional equipment, you can't do that. Even if the shelf of the bow is cut in a little past center, your arrow a lot of times will be outside of the string. We also have some considerations where when you release the string, it has to bend around your fingers just a little bit.
Right.
So our arrows are not on a straight trajectory path always, which is the point I'm trying to make. Sometimes our arrow spine, we have to tune it in a way where, you know, the arrow bends around the riser of the bow. So there's some give and take there when you're setting up a traditional bow versus just getting a nice stiff arrow and going right down the pipe with a compound. And one thing that we have to focus on, and as a target archer that I really have to focus on, is spine. And with carbon arrows, uh, if you notice in all the advertising, you could go to any carbon arrow manufacturer website, and if you notice, what they're going to advertise is their straightness tolerance. You can get
Right.
006, 003, 001, or possibly better than that now, I don't know. But you'll never see anybody advertise their tolerance for spine in a carbon arrow. And they'll say they're 400s, but that's all they say. They don't advertise that you're paying more for a better spine tolerance. They just tell you you're going to pay more for a better straightness tolerance. And that's because they are not good at all at creating good tolerances of spine. And I can tell you as a traditional archer, spine is very critical for us. And I have to assume it's pretty critical for a compound as well. So when you're paying more for that better straightness, you may also be getting slightly better spine. But I guess the point of the conversation is to spine check your arrows, buy a digital spine tester, and verify the spine of your arrows, because even from batch to batch with carbons, I have seen maybe this dozen is a good tolerance between the dozen, but it's 20 points of spine different than the last batch I got a year ago, right? Like these may be 4s and these may be 420s, but they both say they're 400s. They pair them up for you, but they're not exactly the same from batch to batch. So if you buy, so you go to Lancaster Archery or wherever you buy your stuff and you order 3 dozen, well, that wasn't 3 dozen that was match paired from the factory. And then by the time they get to you, if they're all mixed bagged up, you need to check. I mean, it may not all be you, you know, and even though you're buying 001 straightness tolerance, doesn't mean that you are necessarily going to have the spine tolerance. So just another critical aspect to check into with arrow setup.
Yeah, I had to be my scam caller call me in.
Yeah, I heard you there.
And like, okay, I gotta get to my phone, and I tried to find a mute button, and
Yeah.
my mouse was somewhere else. Yeah, most of the time you get a call, it's a scammer, so I just answer, hang up. I don't want to talk to him. So yeah, there's a lot to, setting up spines, and with the compound, if you're under spined, that's dangerous.
Right.
You can actually shoot over spine and shoot just fine,
Right.
because you're pushing straight down the shaft. We're on, like on your recurves, you're not pushing straight down the shaft because you're bending at an angle. So spine is real important, like I say, and you can see how that can be a big deal. And if you don't get a good digital spine tester, how you can probably set something up, because I think they're spined at 28 inches of the shaft. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
get a fixed weight, drop it down, and see where it goes, and see if they line up, and get a scale behind or something. You could make something up, but the compound, we don't worry as much about spine as long as it's heavy enough.
Yeah, there's a couple out there on the market, fairly affordable. Bear Paw makes one. I don't know if there's any in the compound industry that people are selling, but just because I'm mostly on the trad side, Bear Paw Archery, they have a digital spine meter that's good for carbon or aluminum. And then there's a guy up in Canada, True Shaft Archery, and he sells a lot of wood arrows, but he also has a digital spine meter, and it's good for wood, carbon, or aluminum. And I think he's coming out with a new model this year that's even going to have some more features and tricks. But the one that's out now is pretty fantastic, and you can turn $100 set of arrows into a $200 set of arrows really quick. The difference is you just need to buy 2 dozen, and you're going to end up with about 18 to a dozen good ones, because you're going to check the spine. And then another old school trick that I've used, I haven't actually shot a lot of carbon here lately, but I used to use all the time, is with your more expensive arrows, you get that spine aligned line that they paint on there. So like Victory's really big on that. They'll do that spine align, and you're supposed to put that on the top. And what that is that's where they bring the carbon back together. And so some guys will say that's the stiffest point or the weakest point or the whatever this or the most inconsistent point. I don't exactly know how they determine it, but if you want to find that same point on a cheaper arrow that's not marked, and you make up your own shafts, when you buy the raw shafts, if you float them in a bathtub, the spine, where they would normally mark it, like on a Victory arrow, will float to the top. So you can they'll rotate in the tub of water, and you can mark them right there, and then you know where your spine alignment needs to be. But you still need to test, the left and right flex of the spine for consistency, and then you can make $200-300 sets of arrows out of $100 arrows or whatever.
Yeah, I looked that on Three Rivers, and there's a couple of spine testers out there, and
yeah, they make some non-digital ones too. I mean, for traditional guys, that'd probably be fine. I wouldn't recommend that for the compound guys, just because you really need to be a lot more critical. But yeah, definitely some of the old school ones do work. Wood guys a lot of times will go somewhere to a rendezvous or a shoot, and there'll be a guy that has a dozen arrows, and he'll sell them real cheap wood arrows, but he doesn't remember what spine they are. Or like I got gifted a set the other day. Some guy said, "Here, I'm never going to shoot these. Here's a dozen wood arrows." They'd already been stained and sealed, and they're ready for fletchings and points. And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool, thank you." But he had no clue what spine they were. So having a rudimentary spine checker, non-digital, that's good for things like that. But you want to get down to the nitty gritty and get your wood arrows shooting as good as your aluminums or your carbons. You really need that digital capability where it can give you that finite tenth of a pound readout.
Right. Yeah,
I warned you, I'm very analytical.
Well, while we're talking about that, I can, let's take a look at, here's one of the cheap ones, $150. And you can see, you just hang it on there. You got a little scale. that shows where it's at. So, how accurate is that scale?
Yeah, and wood
They
and
also,
carbon are spined differently. So
right,
your carbons are on that ASTM scale, and your wood is AMO. So we do pound numbers for wood. So wood is typically sold in 5-pound spine increments. So just
right,
anybody kind of curious to relate to this at all, I can shoot the difference if there's more than 3 pounds of spine. The furthest distance we shoot is when we shoot competition for world archery. It's 30 meters, which could be 33 yards. There is like a certain percentage of variance. So let's just say it's 35 yards if they really want to be mean to us, right? And at that 33-ish yard mark, if my wood arrows are more than 3 pounds of variance in spine, which in the compound world is probably more like 50 points of spine. I'd have to do the math. I wish I had that calculation handy, but I don't. Then I can shoot the difference. And what I mean by that is one arrow will impact, left of the 10 ring, the other one will be right. If I shoot them, they repeat that result. Like they're, some will group over here and some will group over there. So my spine tolerance, because we're bending around the bow, is not close enough for finite accuracy. So yeah, that's where these spine meters come in. Is that one you just showed will tell you what 5-pound spine group that those arrows live in. But if you want that finite accuracy, that 30-yard, what I call that 30-yard accuracy, you need to know the spine number, right? The exact number. And to get that, you kind of need a digital scale. Those others are just simply not, over time going to be calibrated or accurate enough to give a correct readout.
yeah, and it's just a pin that moves, and if your pin gets moved a little bit or bent, because you're going to store them somewhere, and they can get messed up. It's just things happen, and how do you calibrate it? And of course, the digital one, is there a way to calibrate those? And that's the thing. When you're doing testing, is how do you calibrate your scale so you know what you're at? Now, if you're looking for, if your scale is off, like 5 pounds, but they're all measured off 5 pounds. So now you still got them grouping, but it may not be,
Yeah.
if somebody else measures it, it may not correlate, because you say, okay, I have mine at this number. You have the same number, but they're not the same because your tolerances are different. Your scales aren't calibrated. But if my scale says at this number, then this is what I need for mine. And if unless you bend the scale or something, as long as it's all being the same and you know how to shoot that one, it doesn't matter what the standard is, because it works for you.
Now the True Shaft digital scale, it comes with a calibrator, and I believe you can calibrate the two sensors on either end individually. I'm not 100% sure on that, but the Bear Paw I've owned for so many years, I'm pretty sure it doesn't come with any kind of calibration. It's like you said, it would just be, well, it's probably accurate, but is that number the real number? I don't know. I can tell you that, aluminum is the most spine and straightness consistency. The only drawback is an aluminum can bend. That's what everybody always says. But when you pull the aluminums out of the package, if you ordered 400, they're going to be between 400 and 404, or within 4 points, give or take, of spine. If you order
Right.
400 carbons, you could easily get 420s. I can guarantee you, because I've bought lots of $200 a dozen carbons, and I can go down to my basement and grab a handful of them and prove it to you. I can show you that. Well, okay, we can say maybe my scale's off, but here's a 400 aluminum, and you'll test it, and like I said, it'll be like 400, 401, 402, and then you put this carbon on here that says it's a 400, and all of a sudden it's a 420, or it's a 390, or it's a if you get into some of the cheaper shafts that they sell, like gold tip blemished, I've seen over 50 points of spine in a dozen arrows. So guys like want to go, gonna go a little cheap and buy me a set of these blemished because people told me it's just the looks, the color, the coating on the outside is what's, or maybe the graphic is, but the shaft is still the same. It's not none of it is the same quality as the high dollar shafts. You get what you pay for. So
yeah it's all, what do you want to pay for? That's the thing, is if if you're on a cheap budget, well, maybe buy a half a dozen.
Yeah.
buy three. But you're
Or
still gonna be better off.
buy the $70 to $100 ones, and spinal line them in a bathtub, and then invest the $200 or whatever in a digital scale, and then for the life of your archery, you'll have the ability to cull out 1 or 2 arrows, and all of a sudden you've got 10 arrows that are as good as a $200 set arrows, and you spent half the money, right? That's the route. I mean, I guess I fell into that route because in order to do wood arrows, you simply have to have that setup, versus you could just choose to spend more up front with carbon or
Yeah.
aluminum anymore. Back when I started, they used to have cheap aluminums and expensive aluminums, and they were made out of different alloys, and there truly was a quality difference between the two. Nowadays, what they call the game getters, they're made out of the same alloy and straightness and tolerances and everything. You're just, if you spend more for the camo hunters or whatever, you're just paying for the paint job, the camo on it. You're not actually getting a lot better shaft. I shoot those game getters, the cheapest aluminums you can get for indoor stuff, and man, they're just phenomenal, very accurate shafts.
Yeah, I've had, go to the game getters, they're kind of the low end, they're just kind of green, and some of those we've shot so much that the green wasn't even on the tips of them. They're
Yeah,
rubbed
where
down
the
to the bare
anodizing
aluminum.
off of them.
Yeah.
Now that's not to take away from some of these newer aluminums that have come out with tapered rear ends, or some of the tri-spine technologies that are coming out. I don't know that I'm good enough a shooter to take advantage of some of that, but it the technology every day is getting more amazing, and maybe some of those are certainly a cut above. But yeah, just as far as a standard parallel shaft, don't be afraid to go cheap on aluminum. It's your best bet.
Yeah. And I always shot the double X78s because I could get those in the 1.5 thousand straightness.
Yeah.
That's the straightest I could get aluminums.
Yeah.
And I always shot those, and of course I'm paying the high dollar from back then, in the 90s or so. It was like $60-$80 a dozen.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
And
got a
you
small
get the
pile of
others.
those myself. Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably get the game getters for like 20 to 25 bucks a dozen. I'm paying a lot more because kind of like you, I want to be able to stick them in the X-ray.
Right.
you know,
I remember when I was younger and deer hunting, and I had a bad experience one time. I learned a lesson essentially, and I try to be very ethical with my game shots. But a lot of people have missed or hit in an area that wasn't ideal in wounded game. I was walking up on this field, and there was a couple of does out there feeding, and this was a compound story. They were at about 80 yards. I had a rangefinder. I checked it. I'm pretty sure it was in that 60. It was probably over 60. It's probably closer to 80 yards. But I had practiced those distances, and I was very confident that my arrow was going to hit where I was aiming. No wind that day. Perfect scenario. Deer standing perfectly still. I let it go, and it was a 70-pound compound with I had 4-inch feathers. I remember aluminum arrow XX78 super slams. And I don't really remember the point weight or total arrow weight, but pretty heavy, I'd assume, by compound standards today.
yeah.
And it was a pretty good hit, but it was darn near where I was aiming. But it must have hit a rib bone, and had almost, because of the 4-inch feathers. We don't really realize now that we all use vanes. At those distances, the 4-inch feathers really take a lot off of. There's a lot of wind drag there, and so there's
Right.
almost nothing left in that arrow at that distance. It just bounced off, like it just fell to the ground right there, and the deer just kind of looked at me like, yeah, is that all you got? I mean, because it was like an 80-yard shot, right? And I'll never forget that day, because I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to get a little closer on these deals, because this just isn't working, obviously. So I don't know exactly what happened there, but I would fully expect today's compounds to probably make that shot. Not that I would condone anyone. I was a young kid. I would never take that shot now, or I wouldn't condone anyone to take an 80-yard shot on a deer. But yeah, even at those distances with the feathers, man, it just kills you. You can't penetrate deer like that unless you got something faster than whatever it was I had at the time.
Yeah, and those old bows like that Nova, when I had my store, I sold lots of Nova bows. And they're a good starter bow, and I like selling those because for new archers, For one, they don't have much invested in it, and they're out and running. Um, and if they decide they don't like the sport, they don't have much into it. If they do, I'm going to sell them another bow. I'm going to sell them no rest, new sights, a better release, more arrows.
Yeah.
You can sell the stuff, but they're not fast. And some of the bows now are so much faster. You get a lot more kinetic energy, and shooting those heavier arrows, you're going to get good penetration. I know the first deer I shot was a 40-yard shot. I was 20 feet up in the tree, and I had to get that far up in order to get over the trees. And I was shooting 52 pounds. That's that's low as I could get the bow, and that's where I needed to start. And I was shooting a full length aluminum arrow with I think a 125 or 145 grain tip. And when that deer turned to run, that arrow, I think the fletching stopped it. The feather stopped it from exiting the deer.
Yeah.
And I went clean through it. And you don't need a lot of weight, or a lot of speed, because that bow was not a fast bow at that time. You can do it, but you just got to know your equipment, how much
Yeah.
penetration you're getting, and stick up a target up there, like you said, stick one out at 80 yards and shoot at it and see how much penetration you're getting on your target. If you're just barely getting the tip into it, you don't have enough to kill a deer, because if you can't penetrate a field tip, much more than inch or two into the target.
Yeah, I would say, by today's standards, if you're buying any new compound and you're pulling a weight, over, even if it's over 40 pounds, I mean, at 40 to 50, maybe you need to give a little more care to, make sure you got a skinny, slick shaft and, a very reasonable sized broadhead. But once you get over that 50-pound mark by today's standards on compounds, you have enough. It's just
Right.
tune. It's just tune and whatever. Now with traditional bows, I mean, it's a little different story. Because tuning is so difficult to do. It's not just a situation where, I mean, you could have a guy that has a 50-pound bow and gets terrible results on deer, and a guy that has a 40-pound bow and blows through them. I mean, I'm actually that guy. I started that bow I told you I traded for that got me my first recurve. It was 60 pounds. And I thought, at the time, I thought, well, that should be fine because I shoot a 70-pound compound. And I learned that story of, it was a few days before I could get that bow back to full draw because I was out there in the field just, strength training, essentially trying to get the strength up to pull it back. And so eventually I shot it for a while and I shot it well, but it was very difficult to work up to coming from that 70-pound compound. And I shot deer with that bow with poor results. Little penetration, hard to recover animals because I wasn't very accurate with it. It was more weight than I should have shot. And then I think I went down to about a 50-pound recurve, and I had poor results again because at that time I still wasn't a very good shooter. I wasn't very good at tuning. And, I thought bigger feathers made my arrow fly straighter. So that's what I did. And, I shot, I had another situation where I had a wood arrow in a 50-pound recurve and I hit the deer right on the shoulder and it just bounced off again. And I thought, man, how much weight am I going to have to pull if a 50-pound recurve just bounces off the deer? But the answer to the story many years later is accuracy. I mean, and that's the same for everybody, is that accuracy is a leading, if not the biggest leading predictor of lethality. It is a leading predictor of lethality. And I would say, just from personal experience, it is the leading predictor of lethality, accuracy. It's not your front of center or your total arrow weight or your kinetic energy or your momentum. It's accuracy first. So you want to do the draw weight that you can pull. Again, remind yourself, especially if you're a compound shooter, that here I am with my 26 and with a heavy coat on, probably 26.5-pound draw in the middle of winter, or 26.5-inch draw. I'm shooting a 40-pound bow, and which is pretty much state minimum here in Ohio. And, I'm blowing through deer like hot knife through butter. Now, granted, it's all 20 yards and less, but I mean, that's the distances that I can make ethical shots on moving or, live animals. So that's what I do. But I don't have any problems with penetration anymore. And I'm 20 pounds under what I started with. And I was getting poor results because my accuracy and my tune and my consistency was so poor. And modern bows just get better every day. So yeah, just remember that when you're looking at those compounds on the shelf or whatever you're looking at, and you're trying to decide between the 60 and 70 pound limbs or the 50 and 60 pound limbs, just remember that you got more than enough. It's all about accuracy. You want to hit exactly where you're aiming.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. When I had in store and I sold a bow, you got shooting instruction with it because I wanted you to be able to shoot and teach. You teach you how to shoot, and then you're gonna be more accurate. And it's amazing. One time at the one of the clubs I was in, we had a broadhead sight-in day because you don't allow broadheads in the targets because they're, they just tear them up. They were cardboard targets, but we had some broadhead targets out there to shoot in. And I was amazed at how many people come down there to shoot their broadheads at 10 yards, couldn't hit a standard target. They couldn't even hit it. Yet they're going to go out and hunt. And, so their accuracy, you got to have your accuracy. That's the whole thing. You don't need a lot of weight. I shoot a little heavier weight because it helps me lock into my form better. But you don't need to have anything. Like my first deer was shot at 52 pounds with a full length arrow. I didn't even cut it down. So it was a heavy arrow. I don't know because I think I had a 145 grain tip on it, plus a full length aluminum arrow and 4-inch fletching. And
yeah,
heavy arrow.
That was a freight train.
Yeah. Well, and I say you got a brick wall. You have a Volkswagen at 70. You have a semi at 40. Which one goes through the wall?
Yeah.
The semi.
Yeah.
The Volkswagen gets destroyed because it just don't have a mass to continue. And my hunting arrows aren't really heavy. My target arrows are about 370 grains, finished, so they're really light. And my hunting arrow is a little bit heavier because when I got my hunting ones, I tried some out. PSC come up with a 400 spine hunter shaft, which is it's supposed to be 300 spine, but they come with 400, which is heavier. But a hunter shaft, which is 7,000 straightness. So I got some in to try them, and I found that I could get my broadheads in the white and the 5 spot, where I could get my broadheads in the X ring with the 1000s. So
yeah,
they were a little bit heavier. They're about 420 or something like that. They're a little bit heavier. So when as I replace those, I'm replacing with the Count Pros 300 correct spine. I put weight tubes in them in order to get the weight the same because I didn't want to change all my pins. But most of my shots are 20 yards or less. Like I said, I shot my first deer at 40. I've shot, a few of them at 20. Most of them are 10, 15, 5. I've shot some at about 10 feet. Yeah.
I had yeah, and I started out tree stand hunting, but I've been a ground hunter now for many years, and I'll probably stay there. I get frustrated at times. I bought a full I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I got winded like 3 times in a row, and I hadn't put any venison down yet. I was sitting on the ground, and so I thought, I'm gonna get me one of these saddles and try this thing out. And it's still sitting new in the box. I've never even tried it, but I got back out there and got me some different scent, scent killer type stuff, and it worked better. And I, then I killed 2 deer in 2 weeks, and I was happy again. So now I'm back. I'm back. I'm the ground hunter, but man, it's just amazing. Like when you're doing everything right, even being a ground hunter, I had 2, they were probably yearling does. They're pretty small. Come up, and one was obviously more alert to me than the other. The other one just seemed like didn't really care, but the other one had got my scent and but was also the most curious of the 2. Like, and she was looking right at me. She knew I was something, and she'd come up and man, I bet that sucker got within 10 or 15 feet. I mean, it just was kind of giving me the head bob and checking me out, and they never did spook. They eventually just walked off. But I've actually some of the first deer I've ever passed on. I'll shoot anything. I'm just looking for meat for the freezer. But
Yeah.
I was just at that point, I was like, nah, I'm not going to go through all the trouble, too small. And I passed on those two last year. But yeah, it was a cool experience. I've had deer close before, but they were there a really long time. I mean, they were probably around me 10 or 15 minutes, just right around me. And when you're on the ground, it's just a, a closer experience. So yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I had one time a doe and a fawn come walking through, and it's still early season. It's like, okay, I'm not going to shoot the doe because it's got a fawn with it, so let it pass. It didn't need to. Well, you know what? That fawn bedded down less than 20 yards from my tree stand in a perfect shot, and the fawn bedded down, and the mom took off, and I just watched it there, and I say, okay, now if a doe comes through, or buck comes through, yeah, they're going to be relaxed. And next thing you know, then the doe finally comes back, and then they two go walking off.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I use the charcoal suits, the scent blocker, scent lock, and I actually started out with a British chem suit. They use it for the military uses for for chemical warfare, to protect them from that. And all it is, it's activated charcoal, and it filters
Right.
your scent out. And I know the first time I actually really understood really how well it works, early season, and was out, and it was hot. We hunted in the morning, it was not too bad. I'm hunting the afternoon hunt, and it's hot, and I know I'm going to be just sweating like crazy in that. And so I had just a t-shirt on and my undershorts on, and I put the pants on and the jacket on. I didn't want the jacket because that kind of rough on your shoulders. And I went out there, and I'm still sweating, but I'm sitting out there, and I get done, go to pull it because it's in a pullover type. I go to pull it off, and I figure, okay, it's going to stink. I've been sweating all day, and I pulled it off, and it's like there's no smell, almost like distilled water. Like, this works good. And
Yeah.
then while I'm wearing those, I don't worry about the wind because it's absorbing it. Now, if you're going to be gone for like a week or something on a hunt, you're probably not going to have good luck because after a while you got to recharge them, and you
Yeah.
recharge them in a dryer. But
I
that's
kind of
that's one
use
of those
just
things.
regular, camo, whatever I can buy that's a color that I think looks good from Bass Pro or whatever. I like those mild leafy suits. I think that helps break up your outline a little bit. I don't like a full on like ghillie. It's too much. But I will run a leafy suit for most of the year. And then, when it gets colder, I switch over to, but it's all like Bass Pro or Cabela's brand stuff that I wear
Right.
most of the time. I don't geek out on expensive camo. But really just that old bottle of scent killer. Man, I've had some good luck with that. And I hate to just say the cheap option is a good option, but unless you're gonna look into something like they got the new thing out, it's what, Ozonics or something, where you set the little device next to you, it's electronic, and it's supposed to like fool the deer's nose because it kills the scent particles in the air. My thought on that is like, if there's something that I could set next to me and turn on and it does something to the air around me where a deer can't smell me, I'm not sure I want to breathe that in.
Yeah,
I don't want to be
right.
I don't want to be anywhere near that. I'd like to bury that thing about 6 foot in the ground and walk away. So, I don't know what's in this bottle of, it's actually sitting right here. That's the funniest thing. I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but here it is. Here's scent killer. And yeah, this was my thing last season. I was just getting winded like crazy, and even though I had left my clothes outside and all this stuff and really aired them out good, I was getting winded, and I started spraying that scent killer, and that problem went away. Now here's another thing that I started to test last year with really good results. And again, I don't get kickbacks on any of this. This is just stuff. This one came from my local bow shop, and several of the guys recommended it. It's called Deer at Ease. And see, it's made in the USA. Who makes this? Monster Whitetail Cover Scent and Lures is the company, but I'll put it here where people can see what it looks like.
Oh
Called
yeah.
Deer at Ease, and basically you just spray that on yourself or the vegetation in and around you, and it just kind of calms them down a little bit. And I can't really say for sure that it works, but I have a buddy that actually lives probably not more than a 15-minute drive from here, and he hunts a lot more and gets on a lot bigger bucks than I do. I'm opportunistic. I'm shooting the first thing that comes up. I'm just looking for meat for the freezer. If it happens to be a big buck, great. If it's not, that's fine too. But he hunts the big ones, and he says you spray that stuff all over you in heavy amounts. He's like, you'd be surprised. He's like, really works. So it's not a super offensive smell. It's not too bad. It's not like the doe urine type stuff. It does have a little bit of a smell to it, like deer type smell, but it's more like a dander than it is a urine. So I like it. I mean, I'm gonna try to do a little bit more of that this year. But yeah, that scent killer really impressed me. It really turned the tables and allowed me to get a few deer in range for sure.
Yeah, I know, when I had my store, about 20 years ago, there was a guy that was a chemist for Berkeley. And he had developed what he called descent. And it was a real good spray. And he had some that had earth scent in it. And, one of the demos he did is take a magic marker and rub it on a paper, put a mark on there and then smell it and then spray this stuff on there. And then the smell goes away. And it was chemically altering the smell instead of just trying to cover it. And he ended up, you know, Berkeley was fine with it for a while and they started getting bigger. And then they finally said, okay, you can either do that or work for us. And he chose to shut the business down. And yeah, they wouldn't even let him sell it off or anything. So,
Yeah.
he closed it down and, it was some really good stuff. But, now, we'll have to look at that scent killer that you have there, those that want to cover your scent. And it doesn't hurt, to cover up your scent, best you can.
Yeah.
We have the shampoos that we use, the soaps we use, and all that to kind of help eliminate our smell. And if you can, spray your clothes down with something like that and cover it up, that works good too. And
I had a couple of years I tried this thing they called the Buck Bomb, and it was just this can of aerosol. And right before you climb up in the tree or whatever, you set that thing off down on the ground, and it just just spews just stuff for like 5 minutes straight. And I'm sitting there thinking, what an idiot I am. I'm like, all this noise from this Buck Bomb. If there's anything left in the area, I'm running it off. But I never had any. I can't relate any success I've had to any scent killer products or particular type of camo or whatever. I mean, it just basic scent, just putting your clothes outside obviously is not enough. You need something. But yeah, if the scent killer ain't working, that's just my luck for the day, I guess, because I just haven't found anything I'm willing to try. Like I said, that ozonics, that's not going to be for me.
no,
But I've tried a few other things and just had no success, no additional success. So just stick with the scent killer and go for it. And if I can get them in 15 yards on the ground with scent killer, that's got to be good enough for you guys that climb up in the tree.
right. Yeah, I know a couple of things that I've done. If you store your clothes in a plastic tote or something, and go to the aquariums place in the stores, buy the activated charcoal, take an old sock and put the activated charcoal in there in the sock, tie it up, throw it in there, because the activated charcoal is going to absorb the scent, just like your scent absorbing suits, whether it be the chem suit, scent block or scent lock, any of those, and it absorbs those scents in there, and that eliminates some of the scent that's on your clothes.
Now, is that different than just putting like unscented or if you buy, so let me make this analogy here. So when you buy charcoal for the grill, there's the kind that has the lighter fluid and all that, but they sell some that's just charcoal. Like, what would be the difference between like buying some just plain charcoal for the grill and putting that in a sock versus or a box of baking soda or something that might be more readily available? Is the activated special in some way? Or
Well, no, it's what you use in aquariums.
okay.
It's just aquarium charcoal filter. You go get that and you get a big box of that for almost nothing. Although now it might be quite a bit more expensive, but go where they sell fish supplies and just get some of that. I don't know on the cooking charcoal if that's quite the same stuff or not, because I know what you can do is you can take and char like wood and then you can ignite them. I know a lot of people do that, make what they call char cloth. And what you do is you cut up, an old pair of jeans or something into little squares, stick them in one of those, what do they call them? I've got a container here, Altoids, with the Altoid
Yeah.
boxes.
Yeah.
And then you put it in a fire, and then it turns into a char cloth, a spark, and it'll ignite it.
I've seen that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I've actually made some of it, and I've got a little thing. I'm not even sure where it's at now, but I made some. And it just take a quick spark, and it ignites. And I don't know how that varies because the charcoal will ignite. I don't know. I haven't really looked at that. That's something I hadn't really looked at. But the activated charcoal is dirtier than what they have in the chem suits, because those just there's a lot of dust in it. And I've seen some of the scent sprays that are actually a charcoal, and you spray them and you can see that the black charcoal bits in there, that they're using that to absorb some of the scent. I don't really like those, but um, they seem to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do all that scent killer stuff, and then I've usually got a cup of coffee sitting there or whatever, whatever. So I don't know, it could be anything, but I still have marginally good success. I'm certainly not the best, but I put meat in the freezer and I eat deer all year round, so it works for me.
Well, and one of the things I've done too is when when you're walking in or climbing in, you got an evergreen tree, and I'll pick some of the branches off and I'll rub it on my hands and then rub it on my clothes, because that's the natural scent that's out there, because it's scent from the tree that's
Yeah.
there.
Well,
And yeah,
that might be some of my success. Is one of my favorite spots is I sit underneath an evergreen tree. So maybe I'm getting a little help from the needles or
yeah,
whatever's in the area. But yeah,
because as you're climbing in, you're probably brushing across the needles,
yeah,
and releasing some of the scent, so they're going to just smell the tree, and
yeah.
you know they don't care
I
about
don't.
trees.
And being a ground hunter, I tend to kick the earth up around me a little in case I do need to do one of those situations like I was explaining where I had to stand up and turn a 90. The deer was a 15 yards on the ground. We're staring eye to eye. I stood up, turned 90 degrees just because he was looking the other way. He never even saw me until,
Right.
so the point where he saw me was the first time I drew back. I was in a natural blind that I had set up, but it was still pretty tight and there was some trees in there growing up. And when I stood and turned and I go to draw back, my elbow hit one of those trees, and so I couldn't come to full draw. So I had to let down and take a step forward. He heard that. He heard that tree shake and he looked over, and that's when we locked eyes. And so I had to let down and draw back and shoot real quick. But yeah, if you kick the ground up or kick the leaves away or whatever kind of noise you can make with your feet, not only is that going to make you more quiet if you shift or something and there's a deer behind you that you don't know about, but it's also going to kind of kick up some of that fresh earth scent, right? And that may contribute to some of my success. I don't know. I mean, may not, there's just so many people out there that are much more successful hunters than me. I may not be the guy to get all the advice from. I'm just the guy telling you what I do, and half the deer smell me and half of them don't. So that's just what it is.
Yeah, we just gotta, try what works. And a deer in your hunting area may not act the same way as a deer in my area.
Yeah.
I was hunting some public property, and they're used to people all the time. So they don't really run off. They'll run a little bit, but they don't leave the county because they run into a human. Because they camp there all the time, so they're constantly there all the time, and people there all the time, and so they get used to humans. It's just it don't take them long to figure out they're being hunted, though.
Yeah. The public ground
Yeah.
here in Ohio, if you pop up a ground blind, the deer will typically see you, snort, and start running when they come within about 300 yards. So unless you're rifle hunting, which isn't even legal in Ohio, just forget it. You're not gonna. Yeah, I can't. I remember one time I was hunting public, and I tried that for the first time. I mean, I didn't brush it in or nothing. I just was in the dark. I went to a spot, a flat ridge, popped this ground blind up, and man, sitting there about an hour or two in the morning, daylight's coming up good, and all of a sudden here comes a deer, and man, and it was a very brushy area, so this was only at about an honest 75 yards. But as soon as that deer cleared enough brush where he could see that ground blind, he knew exactly what it was, and man, he was out of there. I mean, it just was. So I'll never take a ground blind to public again. And what you have to do is you may have to compromise a little bit on your positioning if you're a ground hunter like me, or if the right tree isn't in the area for the tree stand guys. But if you do, try to get in that natural cover, there's always blowdowns or, some sort of a, down tree that you can climb in and amongst. It's amazing how much more fun. I mean, and people say about shooting deer with a traditional bow versus a compound as well. But if you go from tree stand hunting with a compound to taking a deer on the ground with a traditional bow, the experience is just a lot more visceral. I mean, for lack of a better way to say it, I mean, it's really intense. I mean, it's like, I've shot deer out of tree stands with compounds, and while it is fun, there's just nothing that compares to that eye level, 15-yard shot with primitive equipment. I mean, it's just crazy how much fun that is. I mean, it's almost to the point where I feel like I'm about to have a heart attack every time. I mean, it just really gets you
Yeah.
going.
Well, it's like, you get closer and closer, and you have to get closer because, you don't have the range. The compound, you have a bit further range. Crossbow, yeah, maybe a little further range, not really. But you go to the rifle, and I've talked to some rifle hunters. It's like, have you ever shot a deer under 100 yards? A few of them say, yeah. Well, have you shot under 40? No. Well, I'm just getting excited at 40 yards.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The bad part is I've never shot a deer with a rifle. I have shot them with a shotgun. I've shot them with a muzzleloader. I had a muzzleloader that I had to give to my buddy Paul because it was cursed. The deer would only come up on my right, which means I had to shoot them left-handed. So I have this muzzleloader, and it was great. I could shoot, man, at like 7,500 yards. I could hit a leaf. It had a nice scope on it, beautiful muzzleloader, and I'd sight that thing in, and I'm right-handed, But I killed 2 deer with it, and both times the deer this only 2 shots I've ever made in my life, left shoulder, because that gun was cursed, and I had to shoot these darn deer left-handed, and it's a really weird feeling, like using your non-dominant eye, your non-dominant shoulder, and trying to pull off a shot. But the great thing about a scope is if you can hold yourself together and you got the crosshairs where they go and the shot isn't super far, things go as planned. So I took both
yeah.
of those deer, but yeah, I've shot them with everything all the way down. So shotgun, muzzleloader, compound, and now traditional equipment. I have yet to kill one with a wood arrow. So, and that's probably because I don't hunt with wood arrows very often. I do a lot of target shooting with wood arrows, but that's going to be on my bucket list next, is to actually get one with wood arrow. But yeah, I own a lot of rifles, but now that I live in Ohio, it's not a legal weapon for, I guess they're worried about, like, people getting hit or something on the public ground or whatever. But so yeah, I need to get a rifle kill one of these days, and I need to get a wood arrow kill. So probably the wood arrows are going to be up this fall, though. That's probably going to be next, but we'll see how that goes.
That'd be a little easier because you don't have to leave the state for that.
Yeah, I can just a lot
I
closer.
know I'm in Nebraska, so we have rifle season. In Iowa, the next state over, they just started allowing rifle here in the last few years. I know several years ago they had one little area that they do rifle, but they were mostly just shotgun. And with some of the new slugs they have for them, they're actually pretty accurate. Their long range gun was a muzzleloader.
Yeah, I've shot so on shotgun, if you just have a smooth barrel, the best I've ever used is those. They're Federal, and in general I prefer Federal for a lot of things, Federal brand ammunition. But the Federal, they're and they say on the box something very specific. They're rifled slugs for smooth bore barrels, and I was very impressed with the accuracy of those. However, I will tell a story. I missed the biggest deer in my life by far. If you can see this little guy, this isn't my deer. This is my grandpa's deer who's passed away, and we killed this. He killed it, but we were together hunting when he killed it. And but that's a little guy compared to the one I missed with my shotgun. at about, oh, I want to say 25 yards. And that seems impossible, I know. But and here's and let me lay out an even more impossible scenario for you, because this is just how bold and ridiculous I am. 45-minute walk in the woods in the dark, back in my early 20s. That was an okay thing to do. And I get out on this ridge, and the forestry, this was southern Indiana, Jackson, Washington forest. There's about 30,000 acres of public land down there. And I had a spot picked out, and I have a lawn chair, like a legit lawn chair, like it blue and yellow and green and metal legs, and just a folding lawn chair like you would see at a beach. The metal kind that they used to make before they used plastic for everything. And there was this tree that the forestry had cut on this ridge, and it must have been a massive tree because it was just big enough. And the reason I chose this tree is because there was a probably close to chest high on me underbrush all along this ridge, and vines and all kind of stuff. And so this tree, this stump, gave me about 1.5 feet of elevation. So I fold my lawn chair out and I put it on the top of the flat stump where the forestry had cut the tree down. And so now I have this slightly elevated view of this whole ridge running out. And I have found that deer, mature bucks, this is just my personal opinion, like to come uphill in the morning. I don't know what it is about that, but they like to travel up a ridge to the top in the morning. That's just a general rule of thumb that I'll use if I'm in a new place and know nothing else about it. So here I am staring out the end of this ridge, and here comes the buck. I mean, it's just like textbook. And I'm sitting there in the wide open. Absolutely. Now I got camo on, but my lawn chair is fruity colored or whatever. And in shotgun season, and it is cold, and I have every pair of clothes. I look like the Michelin Man in camo. I have every pair of clothing I own on, and this deer just, I mean, the most beautiful, biggest rack you've ever seen in your life, and just comes within 25 yards and turns perfectly broadside and stands real still. And and I dropped down on him with that shotgun. Had no sights on it. Had no sights, because in practice, at 100 yards, I was doing pretty good. I mean, and I thought, well, that's much further than I need to shoot in the woods. And at 50, I was very confident. I mean, super. I'm talking like I'll hit an apple confident. And so I lay down and I execute what I believe to be a perfect shot. And a little bit of smoke clears the end of the barrel, and the deer is staring at me, and I'm staring at the deer. And we're both pretty much in disbelief because that was a really loud noise and nothing happened. And so it was about 2 seconds before either one of us made a move, and then he starts to take off, and I come to the realization that I've missed this deer completely, which he seemed to be about 2.5 foot tall body wise. And so I'm like, how in the world? So, then I'm spraying and praying, right? Just trying to mow him down as he runs off the ridge. And to my knowledge, I didn't hit that deer. So, yeah, but the moral of that story is, even if you are going to shoot a shotgun, consider a scope, because what happened was I had a big fleece thing over my face where just my eyes were exposed. And I think when I got my cheek down on the shotgun, it just wasn't quite in the normal position where it was when I had sighted the gun in much warmer weather. And so, yeah, I missed that deer due to lack of preparation on my part, or lack of thinking, about the angle of the sights. So yeah, I put a scope on everything now. So now I have a rifled slug gun and some Remington rounds that shoot good out of that, and that's a much better setup.
Yeah, well, and that story, goes right along with, in archery, you need to know your equipment, and you practice everything like in the summer with just t-shirts on. Now you got your big heavy parka. How does it act differently?
Exactly.
It's kind of tough to put a great big old heavy parka on and shoot in the summertime because it's just too darn hot.
And some of your compounds have high brace heights and some of them have low brace heights, and that's a consideration when you have heavy clothing on. Same thing with traditional bows. One of my favorite hunting bows is the Black Widow. I shoot either a PMA or a PSA. They run 8.5, 8 3/4 brace heights. I prefer that bow. It maintains a lot of speed despite the high brace height, but I don't even wear an arm guard because the brace height's so high that I don't need it. I never run into clothing issues. So, and that's the one time where I've considered some of this more expensive hunting clothing can come in handy, is that sometimes you can spend more money to get something that's just as warm and slightly thinner, better technology in the
Right.
in the camouflage. And so, if I do buy something more expensive, I'm not going to be paying for the color or the pattern. I'm going to be paying for the fact that I can, be a little more slimline in my setup and still clear my bowstring.
Well, and that's why I actually shoot a half inch shorter than what my draw length actually is. I'm 29 and a half and I shoot 29 because that extra half inch of bend in my arm keeps a big heavy park out of the way so I don't hit it.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to put an arm guard on to suck in the sleeve so it stays out of the way. And then that helps it get colder because you don't have that insulation in there. And so that's why I shoot a little bit shorter. Um, it's as I told many times, but my first bow was 32-inch draw length because the lady that sold it to me at the shop said, "How's that feel?" I didn't know. I was buying my first
Yeah.
compound bow. I'd shot
Yeah.
my brother's whitetail too, but that was the first one, and it's like I didn't know. So yeah, it felt okay to me because I didn't know any better. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tune my setup. This is just for the trad guys, I guess. I'll tune my setup a little bit weak, just slightly weak, very, very slight, because I know when I get in the woods and it's cold, I'm likely to just have a little bit shorter draw length on that first, shot. So
Yeah.
then, I tune it in the yard weak enough to where it's still going to hit exactly where I'm aiming, but it's just on the weak side. And then when I get in the woods, even if I'm dead down the pipe or just slightly steady, I mean, it's still, it's just kind of best of both worlds. So
Yeah. Well, we've been like an hour
been
and 45
jabbering for
minutes.
a
Yeah.
couple hours, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like what they go, I plan on an hour, but we never go an hour.
Yeah.
Unless one of us has to leave for something to have a hard stop. But it's you just get talking about archery. We can do this a long time, but
Yeah.
I know we all have things we need to do. And um, so what would you say to our listeners, whether a new archer or an experienced archer, what advice would you give them?
Okay. So new archers, I would say, especially in the traditional community, the movement is a lot more information sharing, a lot more, uh, openness, I guess. So like we're very open as a community, the traditional community, to new shooters. And so if you're a new shooter and there's a lot you don't know, rather than reading it all online, come to a big shoot, come to a big rendezvous, or come to a big gathering and just meet people and shoot with other people. And you're gonna find as much love for the sport, whether you're alone hunting or practicing in your backyard, as you are the fellowship of being with other archers at these rendezvous and tournaments and things like that. So get out there and meet some of your fellow archers, for the new folks, and that will take you a lot further, a lot quicker, in multiple ways than just and the friendships you'll make. I mean, I have usually about a half a dozen of times a year, with all the friendships and relationships I've made through my archery businesses and just my personal archery journey. I get invites to, hey, anytime you want, come down and let's hunt this or do that. I mean, there's open doors for me that just through, meeting other people. And so do more of that. Be more social in your archery for the beginners, and I think you'll enjoy the sport even more than you do now. For you advanced shooters, or just because you've been shooting a long time doesn't mean you're advanced. I'll tell you, I only 15 years I wasn't worth a crap, and then now the last 5 or so I've got pretty good. But for the advanced guys, if you are really high up there on the skill, don't forget to share with everybody else, and don't forget to keep an open mind and learn, but definitely always push the sport to the next level. Like if you've achieved a rank where when you get amongst your buddies you're the best shooter, go find a couple of new buddies to drag in that are better than you and see if you can't catch up to them. Always push that next level. Like I'm always out there trying to progress the sport and figure out what I can do. Like I've shot my top indoor scores with wood arrows, and people look at me like, whoa, what's the deal there? And the deal is, I set a goal 2 years ago to push wood arrows as far as I could, and I pushed them to the level of compound aluminum, and I've achieved indoor scores higher than I've ever achieved with anything else. So, and with traditional equipment, but yeah, so that's the way I take everything, is I just try to take it as far as I can take it and learn as much as I can about it. And I surround myself with very knowledgeable people and very seasoned and skilled shooters, so that I can learn as much as possible. And then I take that information and I share it with those that are new to the sport. So yeah, that's my advice is, if you're an advanced archer, help the new folks. And if you're a new folk, get out there and meet some advanced archers or some more friends.
Yeah, that's good advice, and that's the thing, in archery, uh, we're all of us are willing to help you out. We might be competing against you, but if you're struggling, hey, the guy that you're shooting against, that you're trying to beat, just might be the one that helps you solve your problem, and you might end up beating them. And maybe not. As I'm teaching, I like to say, okay, I want my students that I teach to outshoot me. That's my goal, is for you to outshoot me. And that means that I taught you good. There's in some things you could do that, other events and sports and techniques and stuff, it's it's a little bit harder because you just they don't have the experience you do. But in archery, hey, some of these kids are just doing amazing. It's like I can't keep up with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of the S3DA kids at our local club are beating me on indoor rounds quite routinely, and it's humbling for sure. But they're getting coaching 3 times a week, and they're practicing more than I am, and they deserve every bit of what they're getting results
Right.
wise. So yeah, it was the old saying, don't be upset, by the result for the work you didn't put in, or something like that. And,
Right. Yeah.
but anyway.
Yeah, it's as you get older too, you're not as stable, and you don't see as well, and like talking about these great big long shots, I was like, I don't see well enough to just do them long shots.
Another
So
good reason to switch to traditional equipment. You don't shoot as far, so you don't have to see as good. And in
right.
fact, at the distances that we shoot, it's best if you only got one good eye like me, because then half the target panic, right? If you only see half of it, if you close your eyes, you don't have target panic anymore. So
Right.
so so don't worry about that vision thing. Just get into a class where you got to shoot closer. Just continue to go more primitive, and just keep up with your vision. If you can only see deer out to 30, traditional is for you. I mean, and then when you
Right.
get to 20, it's definitely for you. Just start making self bows. Then no one will care if you only shoot up to 15 yards,
Right. Yeah, most of my deer have been, like I said earlier, really close anyway. I always try to set my tree stands up 20 yards from the trail, because I wanted that 20-yard shot, because then they don't see you. But those darn deer, they don't go by plan. They seem
No.
to always come in closer.
Yeah.
I've had them walk underneath my tree stand. I'm like, I can't shoot you there.
Yeah. They do get close.
Yeah, that's always fun when you get them close enough that you can actually see the hair changing colors when your broadhead slice through the hair. That's a close shot.
That is pretty close.
Yeah, and those are good ones. So anyway, yeah, it's been great having you on,
Thanks
and
for having me. Yeah.
been a lot of fun talking with you. We kind of, we're hitting it almost 2 hours now, and it seems
People are
like
probably
it's
tired of
just
hearing us.
well, it seems like it's just, maybe we talked a half hour, and it, it goes by so good. You get good conversations, and that's been a lot of fun talking with you. My name is Roy Canterbury, and I've been your host today on Arch Talk 101 with our special guest, Trevor.